I never imagined my life would become a story whispered behind closed doors. If someone had told me 2 years ago that I would fall in love with a married man and have his baby, I would have laughed in disbelief. I was raised to believe in loyalty, in honesty, in waiting for something real. But life does not always follow the rules we are taught as children. His name was Daniel. I met him on a rainy Tuesday afternoon at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. He brought his son in for stitches after a playground accident. I remember how gently he spoke to the boy, how carefully he brushed the hair from his forehead. There was something soft in his voice, something that made me feel safe. I noticed the wedding ring, of course, but noticing and understanding are two different things. Over the next few months, Daniel kept coming back, not because his son was hurt, but because he happened to be nearby. We started talking in the hospital cafe. At first, it was harmless. He told me about his stressful job, about how distant his wife had become. He said they barely spoke anymore. He said they were only together for their son. I feel alone in my own house, he once confessed, staring into his untouched coffee. Loneliness recognizes loneliness, and I had been lonely for a long time. I told myself I was just being kind. I told myself I was just listening. But one evening, as we stood outside the hospital under the orange glow of the streetlights, he reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. That was the beginning of everything. Our relationship grew quietly, hidden in stolen afternoons and late-night messages. Every time guilt tried to rise inside me, Daniel would silence it with promises. "I'm going to leave," he would whisper against my hair. "I just need time." Time. That word became my comfort and my curse. Months passed. He didn't leave. Then one morning, I stared at 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. My hands trembled so badly I had to sit on the bathroom floor. I wasn't ready. I wasn't married. And the father of my child belonged to someone else. When I told Daniel, his face drained of color. "A baby?" he repeated. I waited for him to smile, to pull me into his arms, to say this was fate. Instead, he paced the room. "This complicates everything," he muttered. "Complicates everything. Not our miracle, not our child, a complication." That was the first crack in the illusion I had built. He begged me not to tell anyone. He said he needed time to figure things out. I believed him again because I wanted to, because loving him had become a habit I didn't know how to break. But pregnancy changes you. As my body grew, so did my clarity. Daniel's visits became less frequent, his messages shorter. He stopped talking about leaving his wife. Instead, he talked about responsibility, about how a divorce would destroy his son. "And what about our child?" I wanted to scream. One evening, I went to his house. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wanted to see the life he was protecting so fiercely. I watched from across the street as he stepped out of the car. His wife opened the door. She smiled at him. He kissed her on the cheek. It didn't look like a broken marriage. It looked like a family. In that moment, something inside me shattered, but something else was born too. Strength. I stopped calling him. When he finally noticed and came to see me, I was 7 months pregnant. He looked at my swollen belly with a mixture of fear and guilt. "I'll support you financially," he said quickly, "but I can't leave my family." There it was, the truth, clean and cruel. "I'm not asking you to," I replied quietly, and for the first time since I met him, I meant it. The day my daughter was born, I held her against my chest, and felt a love so powerful it erased every ounce of shame. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't a complication. She was innocent. I named her Hope. Daniel came to the hospital once. He stood awkwardly near the door, looking at her as if she were both beautiful and dangerous. "He has my eyes," he whispered. "Yes, but she'll have my strength." He nodded, signed some papers, and left. That was the last time I saw him. Being a single mother is not easy. There are nights when exhaustion wraps around me like chains. There are days when I see families in the park and feel a familiar ache. I know people talk. I see it in their glances when they calculate dates and notice the missing husband. But I also see something else when I look at my daughter. Freedom. I no longer wait for text messages that never come. I no longer build dreams on someone else's promises. I wake up every morning knowing that the love in my home is real and unconditional. Sometimes I wonder if Daniel ever thinks about us, if he sees a little girl with dark curls in a grocery store and feels his heart skip, if he regrets choosing comfort over courage. But then hope laughs, bright and unstoppable, and the past loses its power. I used to think my story was about betrayal. Now I know it's about becoming. I became a mother. I became strong. I became enough. Yes, I had a baby with a married man, but I also found myself in the process, and that, in the end, is the part of the story that truly matters. Hope turned 3 on a warm Sunday in April. I had decorated our small apartment with pink and white balloons the night before. The cake sat proudly on the kitchen table, slightly uneven but made with love. She woke up early, her curls messy, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mommy, is it my birthday now?" she whispered, climbing into my bed. "Yes, baby," I smiled, pulling her close. "It's your day." She clapped her hands and giggled, and for a moment the world felt simple. But later that afternoon, while she played with her new stuffed rabbit, there was a knock on the door. My heart stopped. I knew that knock. Slow, hesitant, familiar. Daniel. For 3 years he had kept his distance. The child support payments came regularly, always on time, always silent. No messages, no calls, no birthdays acknowledged. Until now. I opened the door slightly, enough to see his face, but not enough to invite him in. He looked older. Lines framed his eyes. His confidence had thinned. "Hi," he said quietly. "What are you doing here?" My voice was calm, but inside, memories rushed like a storm. I wanted to see her." I swallowed. "Why now?" He glanced down at his hands. "My wife found out." The words hit me like cold water. She found messages, old emails. She confronted me. I told her everything. Everything. A strange mix of fear and relief washed over me. The secret was no longer just mine to carry. "And?" I asked. "She's leaving me." Silence stretched between us. For years I had imagined this moment, him choosing us, standing on my doorstep ready to start over, but the fantasy felt hollow now. "I'm not here to ask for you back," he added quickly. I want to know my daughter." My daughter. The word stung. Hope's laughter floated from the living room. She ran toward the hallway, stopping when she saw him. "Mommy, who is that?" Daniel's eyes filled instantly. He knelt down slowly, as if approaching something fragile. "Hi," he whispered. Hope hid behind my leg, peeking at him with curious eyes, the same dark eyes as his. I crouched beside her. "Sweetheart, this is a friend." The word felt insufficient, but I wasn't ready for more. Over the next few weeks, Daniel began visiting occasionally, always during the day, always respectfully. He brought small gifts, coloring books, puzzles, a tiny bicycle with training wheels. At first, Hope was shy. She would cling to me, watching him carefully. But children are softer than adults. They forgive without knowing why. One afternoon in the park, I watched from a bench as Daniel helped her pedal the bicycle. "You've got it," he laughed as she wobbled forward. Her laughter echoed across the grass, and I felt something unexpected. Not jealousy, not love, but closure. He wasn't my future anymore. He was simply her father. Later that evening, as Hope fell asleep exhausted from her adventure, Daniel stayed behind. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me be part of her life. She deserves to know where she comes from, but don't confuse that with us starting over." He nodded. "I know." He looked around the apartment, the framed photos of Hope on the walls, the drawings taped to the fridge, the warmth that filled the space. "You built all this without me," he said softly. "Yes, I did." And I realized something powerful in that moment. I no longer needed him to regret his choices. I no longer needed him to choose me, because I had already chosen myself.
Months passed. His divorce finalized. He rented a small apartment across town. He began taking Hope every other Saturday. Slowly, carefully, we built a new rhythm, one not defined by secrecy, but by responsibility. One evening, after dropping Hope home, Daniel lingered at the door. "Are you seeing someone?" he asked gently. I smiled. "Yes." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Serious?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But he's kind, and he's not married." Daniel exhaled, a small, bittersweet laugh escaping him. "You deserve that." Maybe I always did. As I closed the door that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. My story didn't end with heartbreak. It didn't end with shame. It didn't even end with Daniel. It continued, with birthday candles, scraped knees, bedtime stories, and second chances. I once believed I had ruined my life by loving a married man. But life is not ruined by mistakes. It is shaped by what we do after them. And as I lay beside my sleeping daughter, listening to her soft breathing, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Our story was no longer about what he chose. It was about what I built. And this time, the foundation was strong. Life has a strange way of settling into something that almost feels normal, even when it once felt impossible. Hope was 5 when she first asked the question I had been quietly dreading. We were sitting on the living room floor, building a crooked castle out of pink plastic blocks. She paused, studying me with serious eyes. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy live with us?" The blocks in my hand suddenly felt heavier. Children don't ask to hurt you. They ask because they want to understand their world. I took a slow breath. Sometimes, sweetheart, grown-ups make choices that mean they can't live in the same house. But that doesn't mean they don't love their children. She tilted her head. Did he make a bad choice? Honesty and protection wrestled inside me. He made a complicated choice, I answered gently. But he loves you very much. She seemed satisfied with that for now. She returned to her castle, unaware of the storm her simple question had stirred inside me. Daniel had been consistent for nearly 2 years. Weekend visits, school events, doctor appointments. He never crossed boundaries with me. We spoke politely, like two people who shared history but not a future. And then there was Adrian. Adrian came into our lives quietly. He was a teacher at Hope's kindergarten, kind eyes, patient voice, always kneeling to speak to children at their level. We started talking during pickup time, then coffee, then dinners that lasted longer than expected. He knew about Hope's father from the beginning. "I don't need a perfect past," he told me once. "I just need honesty. No grand promises, no dramatic rescues, just steadiness." Hope liked him too. That mattered more than anything. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel arrived to pick up Hope and found Adrian fixing a loose cabinet hinge in my kitchen. The air shifted instantly. Daniel's eyes scanned the room, assessing. "And you are?" he asked, polite but guarded. "Adrian," he replied calmly, extending a hand. Nice to meet you. The handshake lasted half a second too long. Hope, blissfully unaware, ran between them. Daddy. Adrian makes funny voices when he reads stories. Daniel forced a smile. That evening, after he dropped Hope back home, he asked to speak to me privately. Outside, under the fading sunset, he finally said what had clearly been building inside him. Are you serious about him? Yes, I answered. He's around my daughter. She's not just your daughter, I said firmly. And yes, he's around her because he treats her with kindness. Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't want another man replacing me. You were never replaced, I replied. You chose your position. The words hung between us, sharp but true. For the first time in years, I saw regret not as guilt, but as realization. You've moved on, he said quietly. I had to, I answered. And in that moment, something finally settled between us. Not anger, not longing, acceptance. Months later, Adrian proposed, not with fireworks or a grand speech, but in our living room while Hope was asleep in the next room. I don't just want you, he said softly. I want the life that comes with you. Tears filled my eyes, not because I needed saving, but because someone was choosing me fully, without hesitation. When we told Hope, she gasped, Does that mean Adrian will live with us? Yes, I smiled. If that's okay with you. She thought for a moment. Can he still do the funny voices? Adrian grinned, especially the dragon one. She nodded decisively. Okay then. Telling Daniel was harder. He listened quietly, absorbing the news. If he makes her happy, Daniel finally said, then I'll respect it. It wasn't easy for him. I could see it in his eyes. But growth rarely looks graceful. The wedding was small, simple, honest. Hope walked down the aisle beside me, holding a basket of white petals. Adrian knelt during his vows and looked directly at her. I promise to protect you, guide you, and cheer the loudest at every school play, he said. She beamed. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. Families are not only built by mistakes, they are built by choices. Later that night, after the guests left and silence returned, I stood on the balcony alone for a moment. The air was cool, peaceful. Daniel had once been the center of my world. Now he was part of my past, a chapter that shaped me but did not define me. If I hadn't loved him, I wouldn't have hope. If I hadn't been hurt, I might never have learned my own strength. And if I hadn't walked away, I would never have found a love that stood in daylight instead of shadows. Adrian stepped onto the balcony and wrapped his arms around me. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. Yes, I said. For the first time in a long time, the word felt complete. I had once been the woman who whispered her love in secrecy. Now I was the woman who stood openly, unashamed, surrounded by a family built on truth. Yes, I had a baby with a married man. But that was only the beginning of my story. Years passed in the quiet, steady way that healing often does. Hope turned 10 this summer. Everything truly came full circle. By then, our home felt complete. Adrian had become more than a stepfather. He was the one helping with math homework, fixing broken science projects at midnight, and sitting front row at every school performance. Daniel remained present too, consistent in his own way. Weekend visits, birthday dinners, awkward but respectful coexistence. We had learned how to be adults for her sake. But 10-year-olds begin to see the world more clearly. One evening, Hope came home from school unusually quiet. She dropped her backpack near the door and went straight to her room. I followed a few minutes later and found her sitting cross-legged on the bed, holding a family tree assignment. Mom, she said carefully, my friend told me that if parents aren't married when a baby is born, it means something bad happened. There it was, the world creeping in. I sat beside her. Does that mean I'm something bad? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My heart broke in a way I had never experienced before. No, I said firmly, lifting her chin so she would look at me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. But why weren't you and Dad married? I had promised myself that when the time came, I would tell her the truth. Not the bitter version, not the polished version. Just the honest one. Your dad and I met when he was already married. I began gently. We made choices that weren't perfect. We hurt people. But from that complicated time, you were born. And you have never been a mistake. She studied my face carefully, searching for cracks. Did you love him? Yes, I answered. Do you still? I smiled softly. No. I love him because he's your father. But I'm not in love with him. I love Adrian. And most of all, I love you. She seemed to process this deeply, then leaned into me. Okay, she said finally, because I like our family. That night, after she fell asleep, I cried. Not from shame, but from relief. The truth had not destroyed her. It had strengthened her. A week later, something unexpected happened. Daniel asked to meet me alone. We sat at a quiet cafe, across from each other like two old friends who once shared a secret too heavy for their age. I've been offered a job in another city, he said carefully. It's a big promotion. My stomach tightened. How far? 3 hours away. 3 hours. Not impossible, but different. I would never disappear, he added quickly. I'd still come every other weekend. Holidays, video calls during the week. I want to grow too. For a moment, I saw the man I once loved, not the married man, not the guilty one. Just a human being trying to rebuild his life. You should take it, I said. He looked surprised. You're okay with that? We both deserve lives that aren't built on old mistakes. He nodded slowly. Before leaving, he hesitated. You know, he said. For a long time, I thought having hope would ruin everything. I raised an eyebrow. And instead, he continued, she forced me to become better. His words settled gently between us. Growth. That's what she had given all of us. Daniel took the job. The distance was an adjustment, but not a disaster. Hope adapted the way children do when they feel secure. Video calls became part of her routine. She proudly explained to classmates that she had 2 dads and 1 awesome mom. Life moved forward. On Hope's 11th birthday, as friends filled the house with laughter, I stood in the kitchen watching her glow under the candles. Adrian wrapped an arm around my waist. You did good, he whispered. No, I corrected softly. We did. Later that night, after everyone left and the house fell quiet, I found Hope sitting by the window. Mom, she said thoughtfully, if you could go back in time, would you change it? The question surprised me. Would I? Would I choose the easier path? The respectable one? The less painful one? I looked at her, the living, breathing answer to every mistake I had ever made. No, I said gently, because if I changed the past, I might lose you. She smiled, satisfied, and in that moment, I understood something completely. My story was never about scandal. It was never about being the other woman. It was about consequences, yes, but also courage. About learning to step out of shadows. About raising a child who understood that people are flawed, but love can still be real. I once believed I had ruined my future by loving a married man. But the truth is, I built a better one afterward. And as I turned off the lights that night, listening to the quiet hum of a peaceful home, I realized that my story had never been about shame. It had always been about redemption. Yes, I had a baby with a married man. But what I created afterward was something beautiful,